Hello and welcome to Science and the Mystical. It's always such a joy for me to come on here and introduce some interesting and wonderful people to you. So, today I want to talk about what if counseling was more than talk therapy? What if it offered you a whole plethora of things you never thought were possible? Who would you be if you let go that all that encumbers you? So, Christy McLeod will join us today, and she's a registered clinical counselor, and she uses EMDR therapy as a focus of her practice, although it is not limited to that. Amazing individual. I think you're just going to love her. So, when you fall into the arms of her expertise, you are going to feel compassion, understanding, and strength. You know how we all feel stronger when we're with somebody who's strong? All of a sudden, we feel muscled up, and we feel present, and her presence alone awakens you to the seeds of your potential. So not only is she invested deeply in your emotional well-being, she's a really highly visible individual in the community, and we'll talk more about that if we have time, but we'll make a little squeak of time for that. So Christy, welcome, and I'm excited to learn from you today. There she is.
I'm sorry. Hi, Maureen. Thank you so much for having
Hello.
me.
You're so
Hi.
welcome. It's such a pleasure. And
Awesome.
you are in Chilliwack and Yarrow, is it in BC?
Yeah, so I see clients online across Canada based out of Chilliwack, and then I see people in person in Yarrow, BC.
Nice, nice, nice. How
Yeah.
long have you been in practice?
I've been in the realm of psychology for about 20 years and in different fields relating to counseling for 15-ish. And then I've had my private practice going for about 4.5.
Nice. Lots
Yeah.
of experience.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So so we all have a story about what got us to where we are now. Would you
Yeah.
be open to share how you came to choose this field of study and practice?
Yeah, I would love it. And I actually was drawn to this question earlier this week when in a reunion group that I'm a part of on WhatsApp someone posted a photo of us in grade 3. And in grade 3, we
Oh,
had this young man with us in our classroom, and his name was Matthew Braun, and he had Down syndrome. And me and a dear friend of mine, the three of us just hung out all the time. And there was something in that connecting piece that the depth of the friendship that the three of us had with this young boy is actually, I think, the root of it. And then if we fast forward, I worked in the Vancouver School Board for a decade, and in one of my last schools, I was a youth and family worker in the downtown east side for an Indigenous school. Absolutely amazing community. Um, and everything that I was doing there tapped into all of my skill set, and I didn't feel like I could go any deeper. And so I did my master's so that I could go a little bit deeper with people, but really have a greater impact at a level that I was just scratching the surface of and wasn't satisfied with. So, yeah.
so through doing your master's program, there were more techniques and tools and a deeper understanding of the psyche, etc.
Yeah, I think so. And also, it just gives you a greater understanding of the human condition and how we can connect with people. I have a unique story all the way through past grade 3 as well. Like when I was 14, one of the first things I did was I went over to Hong Kong, and I worked with this incredible organization that supported men coming off of heroin. And so when I was 14, I
Whoa.
spent 3 or 4 weeks in this incredible rehab center with these men. And when I got home, it was very challenging to be a teenager because my friends were out there wanting to go to the mall, or let's go to the movies, or let's talk about boys. And I'd literally just seen these incredible men and heard their stories of coming off of substance and, losing children and things of that nature. And so when I did my master's program, probably what it did is it connected my ability to go deep with that piece of me that already really felt it.
Whoa.
Yeah,
So you're an old soul through and
I was
through,
something like that. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
The 14-year-old sitting with these men must have been very impactful for them as well.
Yeah, and when you're 14, you don't know it, right? You just are
Of course.
there, you're exploring, you're just this innocent child, not realizing that, these men have been through it all. And for some reason, I was obviously with adults and really protected by a group of people. So I was in a safe position, but just being able to be there, yeah, it was a very fascinating experience and also just so fulfilling that it kept me going. So I continued with sort of supporting organizations like that. I've worked with the War Amps of Canada that works with amputees. I've traveled to San Francisco and we used to connect at Grateful Dead concerts with people that were coming off of substances. And like, there's just these stories that for some reason, I just kept getting drawn into being a part of those connecting pieces because there's just so much life there when we can be real with one another. You almost don't want to miss it. So for some people, it would be like, whoa, isn't it hard to do those things? But once you've had a taste of it, you see that actually is the stuff that really matters the most.
Incredible experience. So with sitting with the men, I'm quite drawn to that situation. Like I'm envisioning what it
Yeah.
might have been like. And there's an
Mhm.
innocence that comes at 14 and a naivety, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
that must have been quite heartwarming for those individuals to witness you with
Mhm.
them, the scary people in this situation.
Yeah, and so we get there and and our first meal, like I'm 14, I don't know how to use chopsticks yet. Sushi's sort of just coming into popularity. And so here I am, and we go to sit in this room where there's I don't know, I'm visualizing there's 15 to 20 men. And all of a sudden they bring out, this was not the Ritz. This is like, we're gonna
Mm.
support these guys and it's gonna be a little bit basic in our meals, right? And so
Mm.
we get there and they bring out this plate of food, and I'll never ever forget it because it was cow tongue and you could see all
Oh.
you can see all of the little like taste buds on it. And I'm going to tell you right now, I never took a bite of it. And it's one of my biggest regrets because I think that's a little bit hilarious. But also, like, just the innocence of trying to use chopsticks. Like, that's actually where I learned to use them. Now I eat sushi twice a week. But, it's just that the innocence of bringing that life in when you don't know you're doing it. And I think that's probably the power is when we do the stuff that we love or we just are ourselves, that's actually where we are able to do the impact. Like the impact just comes naturally. So here's these guys, like now I get to look back, I'm not trying to be pompous here, but like here's these guys that are in a very serious situation. Like this is not fun. We were in the new boy house, so we were with them for the first 7 days of them really coming off of this substance.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden I can only imagine this 14-year-old girl's like, how do I use these chopsticks? And we would go on bike rides and jump off these like just different cliffs and just do life with these guys. And our goal of going over was to relieve the people that were working there full time. And so our main job was
Mm.
actually to do night duty where there would be two new boys, which is men that are coming off for the first week, and then two staff, and I was categorized as staff, hilariously enough. And so me and this other whoever was with me, and then the two gentlemen would actually be in a room, and our job was to safeguard them through the night as they had withdrawal symptoms and just be there for as a presence so that we could relieve those that were there full time. And so that nature of it was just to be. That was it.
Mm.
And we laugh years later, my brother and I had gone over together, and I would get back to bed at like 4 or 5 in the morning and I was just wired. And it took me a few years to realize I was drinking black tea all night long. I just thought it tasted
Oh
good.
my, yeah.
So yeah, all of these innocent factors just sort of played into maybe even my capacity to be there, or
Mm.
maybe hopefully the presence of just being a part of it was healing in some capacity. And then as you move forward in life, we have the absolute honor and privilege of carrying that with us.
What an experience. Did your parents
Yeah.
go over with you too, or did they just send you two on your merry way?
No, there was a group of people
Mm.
through a church that we were connected to that
Ah,
had family that were very connected with this organization. There's an amazing woman named Jackie Pullinger who went over years and years ago. She's got an awesome book called Chasing the Dragon, which talks about the walled city and
mm.
just going in and realizing something needed to change. So there was a crew of us, I think there was 20 or 25, but these houses are set up on hillsides, so you're not with everybody all in one place. So I was there with I think one other guy within our home, and then there was a group of women, and we would stay in a building, and so there's a team, but we were spread out. So no, my parents
Got it.
just
They're
my
very
parents just
trusting.
said yes, they were, and yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
oh, and no
So
regrets is what I'm hearing.
oh, I would just go there tomorrow if I could, but
Mm.
yeah, very beautiful time. We talk about it regularly, and that's back in 98. So, you know, a
Mm.
few years prior, you those things just stick with you for sure.
Oh, very impactful, aren't
So,
they? Wow,
yeah.
wow, wow. Did you ever
Mhm.
feel in danger or were you oblivious to danger?
So, a different kind of danger.
Mm.
My biggest fear was bugs and critters, and so that dispersed quite quickly when we first got there. I sat on the ground, and all of a sudden, my hand was back, and I was like, "Oh, what is that?" And I looked back, and I had put my hand on an anthill, and they were crawling on my arm.
Oh,
And then about 10 minutes later, I went to the washroom, and there was a cockroach in the bathtub. And then we get back, and there was a tarantula in the windowsill. And so, in a sense, the only danger I ever experienced was getting over that quick fear of, okay, we're going to be here and this is going to be a part of it,
mm.
but never personally in danger, not even for a second.
Wow. Well, I'd have a little bit with the bug thing too.
Yeah.
More the tarantula and maybe rats.
Yeah, not the greatest.
No, no, not it.
So,
No. So that's
yeah.
really, really polar opposite to what you deal with now. Am I correct?
Yeah, it is very polar opposite. And I think part of my history in supporting and being around different organizations and individuals is that you know, then stepping into my 20s, I fostered a home for a while with youth in it, and just the high risk nature of it, I've now gravitated more to working with individuals that are business professionals, or I love to work with youth. Those are probably my two main demographics at the moment, although I have worked with children. Um, just as I love that sustainability piece for myself, and then also just morphing out and working with individuals that are already making that impact. And so if I can step into a position of breathing life into somebody who's doing this stuff, then they're going to pass that on as well. So
Mm.
my focus has shifted from definitely high risk situations to a little bit more of the generalized population. But that shifts depending on who I am working with.
Yes, it
So,
would. So
mhm.
just really showing up for who is there and is
Yeah,
is what you move with, correct?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I get asked this lots of times is what is the value of talk therapy? Because a lot of people have done 23 years of talk therapy and feel no
Yeah.
further ahead. It sounds like
Mhm.
they've just, kind of, uh, what's the word? Kind of built a friendship or kind of
Mhm.
a meet and greet situation with their therapist, just so they have a friend, basically.
Yeah, that's such a good question. So what I'm hearing is, what is the value of talk therapy? And I actually asked my counselor this once because I've been through therapy as well. And I said, why doesn't this work when I'm at home and I do the same stuff? And this
Mm,
was pertaining specifically to EMDR. And she was like, Christy, our nervous system calms when we're with that other safe person. And the reality is that when we have a heightened nervous system or we're stressed out, you can't tap into that part of you that needs to heal. And
mm,
so our bodies literally are designed for community and connection. And when we jump into talk therapy, it provides that. And that's why safety and connection with your therapist, I would suggest, is the number one component of your healing process. Because we as therapists, we're not there to do your healing. We're there to provide a place for you to heal and walk in that journey. And so if you step into a room with a counselor that gives you that safety, and you've never had that pertaining to these areas that have kept you quite rigid, it's going to change a lot. I do really also believe in the power of other areas too. I'm a very holistic therapist. And so if someone came to me and said, is counseling going to fix everything for me? I would say absolutely not. What else are we including though? And how can we bring that into your life? And so, there's times where someone for sure can move past deep traumas and have their whole life shift. There's other times where we just need that person to talk it out and process it, and have them bring in some insight and tools that allow us to grow. So there's always that bigger picture, but I love that she said that to me all those like years ago, where she was like, that connection piece is everything. And so that's I think is the root of why talk therapy helps and is important. Does that make sense?
What a beautiful answer. I feel like I understand it better too. And might I share a little experience of my own?
Yeah, please.
So my eldest daughter was injured. She was hit by a city bus when she was 7 years old, just
Okay.
7, and in a coma for a while. We had to go through talking, eating, crawling, walking, all of those things. So it was really, really traumatic time.
Right.
And I still to this day remember, after feeling so isolated because everyone kind of, scatters like mice.
Yeah.
But there was one neighbor who said, I want to hear about it, and I want to hear every detail. And I just couldn't believe it. It was so therapeutic for me. And it was only after that that I felt kind of confident enough or brave enough to go into therapy to help with that trauma. And it's like it was going to be okay, because I was so afraid, and feeling like, wow, why am I not able to handle this? So so it requires a degree of vulnerability to come and sit before someone like you. You have to feel safe, you have to feel comfortable, and accepted for all your emotions as they arise. So I'm so thankful for people like you and what you provide.
Oh, thank you. I just was reading, it was either yesterday or the day before, was just doing, I don't blog that often, but when I do, I just tap into different areas. And I was reading a little bit of Gabor Mate, and I'll just share this quick quote. And he said, it's not what happens to you, it's what happens inside as the result of what happened to you. And so trauma is that scarring that makes you feel less flexible, more rigid, less feeling, and more defended. And so the summary of that is this thing happens to us, and then our body holds it, right? And so that rigidity, that inability to respond any different way is just a protective piece. And so what I hear you saying is like, all of a sudden you had that person listen, and it was like that rigidity voice, that voice of like, hey, you have to do this thing or you're not going to be safe, just got to be turned down. And then you get to explore and bring in the healing that comes alongside of that. Like, it's really powerful, but it's so simple in practice.
Yeah. It feels so darn big when you're in it, right?
Oh yeah. And it should, right? Because we have our bodies are designed for two things. The first is to stay alive, and the second is to make more humans, right? And so if our number one job is to stay safe, of course it's going to have, thankfully your body had that reaction. It did exactly what it needs to, because it's like, hey, I'm going to keep Maureen really safe right now. And then it does that. So it's actually doing a wonderful thing for you. And it's just gotten a little bit mixed up. And so it's so special when we get to just be like, hey, body, you can still be safe without that thing. We're just going to divert it a little bit over here. And you're still you're actually going to feel better. But it takes a little bit of convincing.
Truly. So let's just talk generally, staying on that same theme. So someone experiences trauma, and then on the other side of it, you're bringing all your experience as a child, or like to that point. So child, young adult, all of that informs how it may go for you when hit with a situation.
Right.
So if it never felt safe because when I see people too, it's like they've never ever felt safe in their lives.
Right.
And then something happens, which just boom, creates this literally a chemical cascade that nearly paralyzes them. It's-
Right. Yeah. But what I just thought of when you said that, because I've been in your presence and I've had that experience of just meeting you and then exploring what you do. And what you do is you give people clarity and understanding in a language that they've never heard someone else affirm them with. Right.
Thank
And so
you.
that's a big piece of it too, where you're just you doing the things that you've spent your life investing in. But
Mhm.
I think in both of our professions, it's so common, like our knowledge and our beliefs they're just rooted. And so it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it's a really big deal when someone steps into your office and you say things about their health that no one else is vocalizing. So I
Mm.
can't remember what your question was, but
Me
that
neither.
that's kind of what jumped out at me, right? Because it's like
Mm.
all of a sudden their walls get to come down because it's like, oh, I've been trying to figure this out for a long time, and you've just nailed it, and you've given me a place to feel safe with that. So it's powerful.
So powerful.
Yeah.
And I remember having people come to see me that I just listen, and no one's again never ever listened to them. And at the
Mhm.
end, is to remind them that they matter,
Mhm.
regardless of how lonely they are, because they're elderly and their friends have all passed, and family is far away or just not invested. And for some,
Mhm.
again, for someone to listen and kind of
Mhm.
unwrap them a little bit
Mhm.
so that they do feel safe and relax into themselves.
Yeah.
That's a big deal,
Mhm.
a super big deal.
Yeah.
So, Christy, when you're working with these variety of groups of people, like or individuals, so you have individuals. I notice you have a
Yeah.
section for men specifically.
Mm.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, great question. Um, why do I have a section specifically for men? I think just drawing out and acknowledging them as a demographic is really important.
Mm,
I don't see very many places. This isn't political in any way, shape, or form, but like I just don't see that many places in our world right now where men are just celebrated, where
mm,
it's becoming more common for men to seek out counseling for sure, for men to have conversations they wouldn't have even a decade ago. But just honoring them is something I think is so important. I think they're a really big, they're so crucial in all of our lives, in all of society. And so I purposefully put it on my website because they are a demographic that I connect really well with and have had, again, this isn't pompous, but just like I've had success working with them regularly and seeing quite drastic shifts in their worlds. And so I have it as a section on my website just to bring in that, like, hey, I see you. And I don't know if they're even reading the website, but there is that place where, like, if you've read it and you've caught it, then I would hope that that's the case in other areas. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Absolutely, because it's true. Most practices of any kind, mine included, it's the majority is women and
Mm-hmm.
probably 1% children and
Mm-hmm.
maybe 10% men. But I see
Right.
it's growing because men are changing, awareness is growing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting to work with them and to practice speaking to them in language they understand, which is different
Mm-hmm.
than women. Like they're two different entities,
Right.
and yet so similar. Um,
Right.
yeah, I thought there's got to be something there. So I thought that was interesting.
And so as a person, I can be a little bit direct. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that too, right? You want that
Mhm.
personality type for when you have a therapist that's going to be received. So not to say I can't be gentle and connect with people that don't have that piece, but for men, usually clear and direct is the most helpful. And so again,
Yes.
just drawing out that demographic of people because every therapist has people that they can work with.
Mhm.
There is plenty of areas that I don't specialize in intentionally, that I don't support because it's not in my wheelhouse. And that's important. Just like
Mhm.
you have areas of health that you're not going to step into, it's not for you, right? And so as practitioners, as clinicians, even as business individuals, you want to make it really clear, who are you that can be helped, and kind of draw that into practice as well.
Well said. Further to that, you
Yeah.
also support businesses, or
Yes.
yes, can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I I'm not currently, but it has been part of my practice to help individuals build their private practices. And
Mhm.
so whether it's the dreaming stage, still in university and curious about how to do it in the future, or if it's individuals that are in practice and they're curious why they're stuck or they're not growing, excuse me, those are definitely areas that I have a passion for, that I understand, and that I work with people to be successful with. So
Nice.
yeah, it's a lot of fun because we wear two hats, right? We're the therapists,
Yes,
but we're also business folk. And
of
so it
course.
gets a little bit convoluted because in your master's, no one's telling you how to do accounting. No one's
It's
saying how to
true.
market.
It's so true. It's like
Mhm.
because I teach how to do live blood as well, and there's a section on how to run your business, and
Yeah.
think that's really important because nobody, right? Nobody says what you might bump up against, so it's an important aspect for sure.
Yeah. It's a lot
Yeah.
of fun.
Thanks for doing that. Everybody should sign up. Your phone should be ringing.
Thanks, Maureen.
Oh, trauma. Trauma
Yes.
is a real buzzword. It's
Hmm.
trending, I would say again, certainly
Hmm.
in my world. And is the fact that the trauma you're experiencing, and maybe, like children might not classify it as trauma, but it becomes just what you know. It becomes familiar. Is that
Hmm.
is that harder to unwind than, let's say, an incident?
Um, it actually took me years to figure out what trauma meant by
Hmm.
definition. Because when I don't know about you, maybe you can let me know, but when I hear trauma, my immediate go-to is like, someone had something absolutely horrific happen to them, or they were in a car accident that has scarred them for life, or PTSD from being in the army. And I and maybe that's like, is that kind of what you think when you think of trauma?
I do, because a lot of the other stuff is kind of what happens in life, and it, right? Not to diminish
Yeah,
it, but life happens, which,
right.
so like my daughter being injured in the way that she was with her argument with the bus, as we call it,
Yeah,
that's trauma
right,
in my definition. But
right.
it's not to disregard how intense life was.
Hmm.
It's almost like, again, from what you're saying, trauma is similar to my version or my definition of trauma, whereas the intensity of life and what happened over numbers of years traumatizes.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
like a hairline difference, yet very different.
And what you're saying makes so much sense to me. I think the part where I've just veered off is that when you're just talking, I was reminded of the visual of like an elastic band, right? If you
Mm,
have an elastic and you stretch it out, it's so tight that it's like it wouldn't take very much for the elastic to break.
got it.
And so I think in the culture that we live in, a lot of us have that elastic so tight that things happen, and this is just off the top of my head, so I might change my mind tomorrow by this, but we when that elastic breaks, I think it takes less for us to have a traumatic response these days. And so our body becomes rigid and less flexible because we don't have the coping connection pieces that are really important. And so I think trauma used to just be the bigger pieces. I think now it's like trauma is like the hard stuff that goes through that impacts our nervous system that needs to be shifted back to understand how it's going to be safe. So I think there is two or three categories of trauma. So there is the big incidences, and then or people that have gone through horrific things through their whole childhood. And then I think too, there's some traumatic responses that are becoming more typical, because again, like we're supposed to be in community and most of us are isolated, and we're supposed to be in nature and most of us are in cities. And there's these pieces that make life a little bit more challenging for us to physically react to. So if someone came in and they have a larger, I am a trauma trained therapist, but that is not my area, because I recognize that, for example, if someone has severe PTSD from being in the army, I wouldn't support them out of it. I could be their therapist to an extent, but somebody who has a stronger background in deep EMDR, or maybe even more like a psychologist or psychiatrist, they are going to have a different capacity to heal with that person alongside of them in their journey than I am, because as I mentioned, like that high risk focus has been shifted as I've grown my practice more and more. And so personally, it's just not an area I spend a ton of time supporting clients with, although individuals regularly have hard things that they've gone through. So I don't think that it's that they're more complex. I think what's more complex is that you have, like you just said, the everyday things are happening, right? Life is hard, you have to push through them, and then you have to add that on top. So I think it makes another layer that a person has to explore and heal through. And so it's not just, oh, I have my day-to-day stressors. It's I have my day-to-day stresses with this other component that I need to have healing in so that I can even touch on these other ones. So I wouldn't want to say that it's more challenging, because I don't want anyone listening or seeing this to be discouraged that it's going to take longer or anything like that. But it's just acknowledging that there's pieces involved that are challenging.
I love that you know the pieces. I mean, that's what you're so good at. And absolutely no disrespect to people's traumas and events in life, because that's a big deal. And I want to just be really clear about that. What I'm hearing you say too is that we need the tools, and we don't always have the tools. So someone like you can provide practices and tools to support wherever we are and what we're going through. Again, back to even just the listening component is huge, totally huge. So now I'm a fan of talk therapy again. So, thank you. Yay, hooray. And when we were talking earlier, as we were kind of, just connecting again, it's the love affair. We're stoking the love affair with self. We're remembering who we are, and that we're here for more than just what happens to us with us. There's a much deeper purpose there. One of the things that my adult children reminded me of is that my generation was, you must suffer in order to, suffering was noble.
Right.
And we don't need to be in the house of suffering. So to just do that little switch up was really a powerful reminder to me. And I see that in people, and I love to share that wow, you're leaning heavily this way. What if we just kind of balance things out a bit? And I love to refer people to people like you, because we need people like you to help hit the reset button. One of the ways you hit the reset button is using EMDR. This is a huge topic, I know, but can you kind of give us the Coles notes on that?
Yeah. And so just a slight disclaimer, I've spent a lot of time being a client through EMDR. I'm trained in EMDR. And then currently I use pieces of it, but it's not the base that I'm using for most sessions. But what I love about it is, so EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Okay.
Whoa, big
And
one.
so it's a big mouthful for sure. And every time I've explained it, it's come out differently. There's so much science, you can grab pieces of it, but the gist of it is when you go to sleep at night, you have REM sleep, rapid eye movement. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
And for some reason, so that's called bilateral when it's going left to right, left, right. And so for some reason, our body loves that. REM sleep is your deepest sleep. And so EMDR brings in that left to right bilateral in session. Okay. And it can do that in a number of ways. The way that I use it in my practice is I have headphones on with the client who also has headphones. And I have a site when I'm working with clients online. I send them a link and they open it up on their side, and I am in charge of what happens through that site. Okay.
Yes.
And so it plays a sound, and the sound is bilateral, which means that it sounds like a soft drum in the left ear, and then it goes right ear, and then it goes left ear, and it keeps going. Our body, when it's healing, can often put up its defenses. And so if that wall goes up, we can't tap into what needs to be talked about or worked on. When we have the bilateral, one of the simplest ways to understand it is it acts almost like it's not just a distraction, but it gentles and softens our defenses. And so there's often a speedier, gentler, quicker recovery and healing process in talk therapy because that wall is not there in the same thickness as it would be without the sounds. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Okay. And so until a person has experienced it, it just sounds goofy. It's like, well, why? It's just a sound. But in the same way, it's doing what the body loves, right? Whenever we can tap into the natural processes, we're going to be, it's just a good place to be, right? And so I've used EMDR with numbers of clients, some that, we put the sounds on and all of a sudden a memory will actually come up from their childhood they didn't even know existed.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's
That's
very,
cool.
very, very powerful. It's very fun. Just when that's the therapist thing is fun. So it just invites this piece that, I almost think of it like it's not the same as a dream state, but it brings in that, like, all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, Maureen, we were talking about the sun, and all of a sudden I'm remembering when I was on a slide when I was 6 years old and I fell off and this kid laughed at me. And it just like
Interesting.
brings these pieces to the surface. And so it's bringing memory from one part of your mind to another and like putting it where it needs to be. I always imagine it like there's been something stuck in the kitchen, like an item in your house, and it actually belongs in the basement. Or this item that's in the basement and it
Oh,
belongs in
cool.
the attic. And so it's like it's helping reposition in your mind and in your body things that are taking place that have been a little bit mixed up.
You make it sound so beautiful and simple. I love that.
Okay, because just now when I was explaining it, I felt like I was like very messy. So I'm delighted that it comes across as simple.
If I got it, then anybody can get it. So,
Okay.
so
The
this
other,
remind. Oh, sorry.
no,
Can
go
I
for
just
it.
interrupt with one thing?
Oh, of
So
course.
there
Yeah.
was something called hemisync that I did years and years ago, which was very similar with regards to how sounds would be shared back and forth between ears, and
Yeah.
things like the solfeggio frequency and all these healing frequencies.
Mm-hmm.
There's stuff that happens there too with how it's set up for us to receive.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so your version is, I'm saying simple, not to make it
Yeah.
less than, but I like this. I love the simplicity of it, is what I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
say.
Well, and then you sharing that shows us that these kinds of techniques are not new,
Hmm.
right? They've been evolved. And so EMDR does have quite a structure to it, and there is pieces that are quite formulaic. But the bilateral, for some reason, our brain just loves it. And I don't have an article for you to read about research behind this, but There's now even music out there called 8D that you can look up on Spotify, or there's, you know, I'm cautious to say this because if someone's listening and they try this and it brings stuff up for them, I'm so sorry. But you can go online to YouTube and there's some really soft meditative music that has the bilateral. And what I'm finding more and more is that it's actually really helpful for ADHD and ADD symptoms. And it's almost like if someone is struggling to even clean their house and they put this music on, it's like it gives them that focus. And so
Love
I
it.
just love that these tools that originally were created for people that had severe trauma are now being able to use with like business professionals like yourself, where you want to like shift your capacity to the next level and have more courage. And then people that are struggling with focus, they can have a tool that they can tap into. Like, it's just so neat that there's such a spread that is being used with this therapy separate from just being in a session. So it's kind of exciting.
That is exciting. I'm going to literally try it when I'm doing heavy duty course
So
development or things like that.
the only reason why I vocalized and shared this out loud, because really, if someone's listening, don't listen when you're driving, don't listen when you're running. Like
Yeah.
it can impact and make you dizzy. And the other piece is that from my subjective experience, you cannot tap into the healing realm without having another person. So if you try Marine and all of a sudden the sound is bringing up an imagery or something that's too much for you, turn it off. Don't go there.
Okay, caution noted. I'll let you know.
Okay,
I'll keep
sounds
you
great.
posted. Oh my goodness. When a person is liberated from their attachment to traumas, dramas, hardships, etc., do you have like a story about the most profound change you've experienced once they have pulled away from that attachment?
I am so cautious. Like, I could be very I'm just so cautious with my client stories because they're such treasures to me, that when I pulled up the Gabor Mate quote to just share with you, the other one that I absolutely love is next to it, and that will connect with what you're asking. Can I just share it?
That would be lovely.
It just came up last week, and I think it might be the most significant quote I've ever read in my whole life about trauma and healing and joy and life. And I'm so sad that it was just an unknown author off of Instagram, but it said, "You are not healing to be able to handle the trauma. You are used to the trauma. You are healing to be able to handle the joy." And so I just, yeah, it's so special, because I think part of the time when we think we're going to go in and we're going to heal, it's like, well, then I'm going to have to go there again, and I'm going to have to go there again. And it's like, when you ask what's the most significant piece, I would say it's that then people can handle the joy. Because, you know, if you have your wall up from being in an abusive relationship and all of a sudden that heals, you can handle the joy of connection again. And if someone has anxieties removed, they can handle the joy of stepping out again and being a part of life and things of that nature. And so, you know, what would be the things that I see that shift when we heal is people being able to live out the stuff that's like day to day, doing it with peace, and people that are able to build relationships. And like, I love it when all of a sudden the client will share like, oh, and then I was able to clearly communicate this thing. Well, all of that is the result of your trauma healing, because if we're rigid, we can't do it. And so I think that's probably my very favorite of all time quote for sure, because it encapsulates the whole point. We're not going to therapy and responding to trauma so that we get to sit with it anymore. You've sat with it enough. Like, let's not be like, we don't want that to be the basis of your life anymore. We want you to go out there and be like, hey, I used to be really self-conscious, and now I wear a tank top all the time and I don't care what anyone thinks. Or, you know, like, I've always wanted to do public speaking, but I would throw up every time I thought about it. And now I'm leading speaking groups. Like, that is the end result of when we tap into this stuff. Like, it goes from, let's get rid of this rigid heart, to, hey, there's this absolutely colorful life that I get to have choice in. So my body is no longer responsive with just a reaction. I get to go in and experience all this stuff because I'm choosing to do it, and I want to do it, and I get to do it.
So beautifully said. And I totally respect, we're not out, here to talk about any specific individual, but I love how you put it all together in this gorgeous basket. Uh, all the things that inspire you, all the things that have really moved you as you work with people.
Does that answer the question?
Oh, more than so.
Okay.
Oh, yes. No, it was excellent. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And there are spiritual insights that are to be gained while someone is in therapy or in counseling. And are these profoundly showing up more so as we have more, do we have a capacity to reach these higher spiritual places because the world changes and we have social consciousness and we have, all kinds of different things to contend with?
Good question. And so are you asking, can we tap into the spiritual realm that like if I have a connection with the spiritual realm, just like, is there like, what capacity do we have for that right now? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Yes, mine was very wordy. Thank you for simplifying.
So that's like the conversation, right? Because we can't do these things alone.
I know. That's so good. Thank you.
So I have this self-care table that if any of my clients hear this, they're going to be like, yes, she uses that. It's a really practical thing. And I draw a table with 5 legs on it. And the idea is when you go into a restaurant and you put something on a table, if one of the legs is wobbly, you notice it. If you lean on it, if you put a cup on it, you kind of you feel it. And so I didn't create this, but the original one didn't have the spiritual leg on it. And so my table has 5 legs because there's community, whole foods, movement, sleep, and spirituality or nature or religion, whatever that piece of you is drawn to that makes your heart beat faster that you can't live without. If you're breathing, you can sleep well, all of those things are natural, but if this thing isn't a part of your day-to-day, it's really hard for you to exist the way that you want to show up. And so I think is there yes, absolutely, the spiritual realm is being tapped into in lots of different ways for lots of different people. And so again, it's that thing that makes your heart come alive. And I think right now, just with the busyness of everything, that's one of the last things to be tapped into for lots of people, but it's actually the thing that sustains us. And so it's sort of a paradox of like figuring out, okay, well, what do we draw on it first, or do we get to tap into it after I've explored all these other things? And so I think first, a person just understanding what that means to them is really important. And then second, I think some of the areas that used to be more spiritually labeled are now coming in to connect with other areas. So for example, mindfulness and meditation used to be really just connected with like the yoga world and Buddhist principles and things of that nature. And now they are so highly researched. Like I would suggest mindfulness is one of my largest therapy modalities that I use in everything that I do. And so it's drawing on these spiritual, they used to be labeled spiritual, and bringing them into the practical as well. And I think because of that, then there's a connection. So it's a tricky one because there's just so many avenues. If I've come from a deep Christian belief background that just trusts that God has me in the right place at the right time and that everything is working in my favor, that might be different from where you're coming from. And so within counseling, it's navigating, okay, well, what is grounding Maureen? What's grounding Christy, or what's grounding the next person? And how can we draw on it and bring it to session? And have it be part of the healing journey. So again, I don't remember the question, but those are some of my thoughts of spirituality.
It's beautiful that all aspects show up, and I love the 5-leg table because
Mhm.
it's so true. One could be shorter than the other. You know, we need to balance things out, or we don't need to, but the opportunity is to just balance it all out.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And that spiritual
beautiful.
place for each of us is going to connect us with that peace that we're looking for. Right.
Hmm.
And so before we pressed record today, we talked about Tara Brock, and this wonderful woman has free meditations and mindfulness practices online if anyone is interested. But she taps into all these areas that just allow that grace and self-compassion. And so
Nice.
I think that part is so important because it does invite that healing. And so yeah, I think it's a key part of counseling, but I wouldn't suggest it's talked about very often.
Yes, it's not the focus.
No, and I
No.
think that's because everybody's belief systems are so different. So even if a
Hmm.
person came in and they asked for it specifically, I tread very, very lightly, because my experience is that if you go on a road that you think the client is also on and they're not, it's actually dishonoring to them because
Yes.
you're not hearing that deepest part of who they are and their greatest value system. And
Hmm.
so I would suggest it can be connected with healing. I wouldn't suggest it's the major piece of my practice or most counseling practices, but that's just
Yes. It.
my opinion.
Oh yeah, and there are awarenesses that come forward as your healing aspects of self, and one of them would be that spiritual one. So I was had
Yeah.
curiosity there. So
Yeah.
before we finish today, because time flies when you're having a good time, um, we can get into deep philosophical things even more and more. But I really wanted people to know what you're involved with in the running world because
Aw.
you're just amazing. Everybody
Aw.
loves what you do for the community.
Aw. Well, thank you. I would say I'm growing that piece here in the community. The short version is that in in the springtime, so for my 40th birthday, I had decided I was going to learn how to run a half marathon, and then I was going to host one and fundraise for a youth organization. And so for some reason I thought that I all three of those things would be a good thing to do at once. So I wouldn't suggest that I'm how do I answer that? So we did it. It was absolutely wonderful. It's really impactful when you just step out there and just connect with people that are doing amazing stuff. And so I think probably my favorite part was, when it was a citywide run. Anyone was welcome to join. We had a gentleman come and do like tracking and finish lines and stuff like that. And he's the one that hosts major runs for like Mount Okuma Co-op and things like that in downtown Vancouver. So it was very special. We raised a few $1,000s and it was a sunny, beautiful day. And we got to provide the funds to this incredible youth organization called Girls Who Leap. They're based in the downtown east side. And it's run by a woman named Mitra, who I would suggest is the most fearlessly faithful woman I've ever seen work with any youth organization. And I have met wonderful adults that do it. And I'm not to disregard what they're doing also, but I just love her heart behind things. And so it was really fun to have them out and be a part of it. But I would suggest that, we do live in a time where we're so dormant. And so out of that, I've just continued to run and to train. And so recently did my first accidental sprint half marathon, and I have a half marathon coming up at the end of the month. So it's less community driven at the moment and more just kind of staying with it just for myself and to get stronger. But also I feel like it's really impactful for people to know when others are doing things that are challenging and hard, and it's really encouraging. And so out of that, we now have people in California that have put on other half marathons. We have people friends of ours that have never run before, and now they've trained for a half and run it. And so again, if we were to circle back to the start of this conversation of just like that 14-year-old in Hong Kong just being herself, and talking about you, Maureen, when you sit with somebody and they come in and they just get healed through your presence, like it's really what sets your soul on fire? How can you do more of it? And then out of that, there's such a radiation of life that other people hold on to. And I think if we don't follow those passions, we miss out on our ability to impact just by the things that bring us alive. So, yeah.
What a beautiful conclusion. Thank you, Christy, for the work you do and how you truly impact others. Thank you for bringing understanding to people's and everyone's misunderstandings. It's really beautiful. Thank you for opening the door so that we can step into ourselves. And this is really huge. And indeed, it's been a pleasure. I also thank you for the reframes on some things that I put out there. It was really valuable. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Maureen. It's just been such a privilege.
As well. And perhaps we'll do it again.
I would love to, anytime.
Maybe we can have a running clinic or something for all of us wannabes.
If I can just put out there, if it's okay, you know, if individuals are watching, I have clients all across Canada that are online, and then I do in-person work in Yarrow as just a reminder. And so teenagers are welcome, adults are welcome, and then my current area that I'm just stepping into, if anyone is willing to give me a little bit of a chance, as I will be supporting couples in the next 4 to 6 months.
Whoa.
And so that'll be a wonderful place to just go in and honor that piece with them, but we're not quite there yet.
Oh, how exciting. Thank you for that. And I encourage anyone to seek you out, because you were just an incredible being and so easy to be with and to open up with. So
thank you.
You're so welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.